Here we go. Cool. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Glenn, who's here with me today. This is
Good
the
morning.
Think and Grow Rich Daily Hangout. We meet Monday to Friday at the same time to read a little bit from Think and Grow Rich or Your Right to Riches at the moment, the lectures that Napoleon Hill did. And the aim of this group is to help everyone who's a part of it to deprogram from lack consciousness, because the book is all about how to become successful and really live and breathe prosperity consciousness. So, and I have to say, actually, I was saying this to you yesterday, Glenn. Um, I think this is now I started doing this back in March, and I really am noticing a difference personally, because obviously the person who's here the most. um, but you're almost here as much as I am, Glenn. In fact, you are, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah, and
yeah,
I noticed. I really feel like it's strange. I think about the book a lot now. Way more than I ever did before. After I just listened to it on my own, I think it
yeah.
has an effect when you regularly tune into something. You make, because it's also the commitment that we've made to become students of this book and
Right.
to
And,
embody.
first time I've ever read it, and I'm 72 years old, but you know what? I mean, it has so many things in it that are very, very powerful.
Yeah,
Uh, that I wish I had read it when I was your age. You know what
yeah,
I mean? I wish I had. I mean,
yeah.
I think it could have been a very powerful tool for my life too. I think.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what age, and someone I saw the person who inspired me to start these hangouts, who changed his life after becoming a student of this book. I talk about this a lot. I just think this is such a brilliant story. And I came across this man when he had posted a really beautiful video of he just paid off his house, his mortgage, and
Yes.
someone had sent him a note saying, "I'm so happy for you because I know what it was like when you were really struggling, when you started a mastermind with one person." And he's crying in this video, and it really touched me. And
Yeah.
he told the story of how he came from a very poor beginning, living in a
Yes.
trailer with his family, and his one of his sons needed a big medical surgery, and he just had no idea how he was ever going to make that kind of money, and it was way more than you can put on a credit card. And he just knelt down and prayed to God, or the universe, infinite
Yeah.
sources, and asked for help. And the sense that he got was to become the student of this book and really become a student of it, not just read it. He'd read it once before and had it on his bookshelf, but he decided to really become a student of it. And now he's living such a different life. And he does a call every day, later on than this time, which wasn't that good for European people. So gave me the idea for this. So it's just sometimes it's nice to be reminded of. And he says, "Oh yeah, this is what I was going to share." He When his sons asked him, like, "What's the book that you're always reading, Dad?" He said it's the magic book.
That's it.
So I do think there's obviously
Well,
not.
I think I mentioned to you before that the way I came to TAGR was kind of unusual too, and this is something I'll share with you too now. Is that my brother passed away in early March, and my sister-in-law like the end of March, and I was pretty well crushed because these are people that I love very, very much. So it
Uh,
happened one morning. I was up and I stumbled onto your group, and I said, "Well, who's this little girl that's teaching us about how to move forward?"
yeah.
And then I started listening, and I said, "Boy," I said, "that's really fascinating." Well, I had to go to California for about a week to take care of, well, actually to attend a memorial for my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And and when I came back, I looked it up again, and I said, "Well, I've got to get involved in this because it would lift my spirits and lift me out of that. So
Oh,
that's one of the reasons I'm
yeah.
here.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That's so touching. Oh, yeah. And you've been and I just think it's amazing, Glenn, that you not only do you wake up early to come on. We had another lady for a long time as well who was part of the hangout. She would get up at 5 a.m. I think, but I think you get up even earlier. And she's just moved to Montana. She says hello, by the way, if anyone
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
Jackie I'm
yeah.
talking about. She would come regularly on for a good few months. Um,
Yes,
yeah, and you've also, you're using Google Hangouts, you're reading from the book, and some people who are in their 30s who I speak to are like, oh, I don't like technology, I don't understand how to use it. So I think it's
yeah,
awesome that you're not afraid to learn new things.
yeah. Right.
And I
Yeah.
think also something that makes the book pretty special is that it has, to me, it's not just what the words say, it's the fact that it's the culmination of so many interviews that he did and so many conversations that he had with over 500 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Because sometimes
Yes.
when you're reading it, it might not seem like the most, some of it you've probably read before, and it was actually probably first taken from this book, because the book was almost like the foundational book for personal development. Um,
Yes.
and so, but what I think makes it extra special as well as that is the I think it's like you tune into the consciousness of all those people, like that shared their time with Napoleon, and he wrote about them and he shares some of their stories in it. It's really fascinating. So
And age is no limitation on using this book, right?
no,
That's another
absolutely,
thing too, right?
yeah. And the
Absolutely
guy,
not. You could
yeah,
start if you're 80 and you want to, you have dreams and you want to build a
yeah,
different life. Why not? Why not? Right?
exactly.
It's open. You know.
I was on yet another hangout yesterday with someone who works in what I do, or working on the internet, and he was asked, he struggled for a very long time as an entrepreneur, and now he's doing very well. And he was asked, is there a book you'd recommend to people? And guess what book he said? Think and Grow Rich. He said that he was in a library, and it literally almost fell on his head. It just kind of
Yeah.
fell off the shelf, and he took
Yeah.
that as
So
a
the
sign to
universe was
read
speaking to him.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just thought that was like, oh wow, this is,
Yeah.
it's not just any old book.
Yeah.
And I think all books can help us. So I'm just a big fan of them.
I believe so too.
On which note, we're on page 21 of the Your Right to Be Rich's lecture notes, point 28, and yeah, page 21. Do you feel like reading again, or I can read again? I don't mind.
Yeah. I'll read it, Sandy. Sure.
Cool. Okay.
And we were on number 28, right? Is
Yeah,
it
that's
28?
right. And just a
Okay.
quick note for people watching, because I can see we've got quite a few viewers. If you can't get into the Hangout and you'd like to, send me a message on Facebook, because I will break my rule of not checking Facebook while I listen to the reading quickly to check if anyone's, because I know sometimes people have trouble getting in. So I've been trying to rack my brains how to solve this problem, because I don't understand how some people get in really easily and some people just can't seem to. So if you're one of those people, just let me know, and I will help you get in. And I'll mute myself out now. Go for it, Glenn.
Okay. 28. The habit of applying the golden rule principle in all human relationships. One of the finest things you can do for yourself is to put yourself in the other fellow's position when you go to make any decision or engage in any transaction involving the other fellow. Just put yourself in the other fellow's position before you make a final decision. If you do that, the chances are that you will always do the fair thing by the other man. 29, point 29, a positive mental attitude at all times. Point 30, the habit of assuming full responsibility for any task that you've undertaken, not coming back with an alibi. Did you know the one thing that puts the majority of people the most adept in doing? Audience member, alibis. Napoleon, alibis. My, oh my, alibis. Creating a reason why they didn't succeed or didn't get the job done. If the majority of people who create alibis would put half as much time into doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing that they put into explaining why they didn't do it, they would get a lot further in life and be much better off. Generally speaking, the man who is the most clever at creating an alibi is the most inefficient man in the whole works. They make a profession of spinning alibis. They think them up in advance so that if they are called on, they have an answer. There's only one thing that counts, and that's success. Results are what counts. Results. Napoleon once wrote an epigram covering this subject that he thought was very effective. Success requires no explanations, and failure permits no alibis. In other words, if it's a success, you don't need any explanations, and if it's a failure, all the alibis and explanations of the world won't do any good. It's still failure, isn't it? Female audience member, yes. Point 31, the habit of keeping the mind occupied with that which one desires and not that which one does not want. The vast majority of instances in which people engage in personal initiative is in connection with the things they don't want. Have you ever thought of that? There's one place where people don't have to be taught to take the personal initiative. They really work at it, work about thinking of all the things they don't want. And that's precisely what they get out of life, the things that they think about, things they attune their minds to. Now there's where the word transmute can come into play. Instead of thinking about the things you don't want, the things you fear, dislike, and distrust, think about all the things you like, all the things you want, and all the things you're going to become determined to get. Napoleon went down to the travel agency to get his ticket changed so that he could come back a different day. When he walked in, the manager of the travel agency grabbed his hand. When he saw who he was, he introduced himself and started into selling him Think and Grow Rich. Audience laughs. In a little while he still had a hold of Napoleon's hand, talking to him, a man came in, a friend of his who was connected with one of the airlines. He heard the name Napoleon Hill. He grabbed, by the way, we had read this before too, Sandy, I believe, right? Remember that one day that we jumped ahead, right? He also started to sell Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich, and he said, you may be interested in knowing that before I worked with the airline. I had a sales organization with approximately 100 people, and I required every salesman to have all of your books. That was a must. Napoleon felt pretty good as he started out. There were two very nice-looking young ladies standing on the sidewalk giving out election literature, and he passed by. One of them said, "Say, aren't you Napoleon Hill?" He turned around, bowed, and said, "Yes, I am. Who are you?" She said, "Well, I was at a woman's club about 2 years ago when you delivered an address, and this is my cousin here. Both of our husbands are very successful now due to the fact that they have read your books." Napoleon went over to his car. The policeman was making out a ticket. You see all of this talk. Audience and Napoleon laughed. Napoleon said, "This is the payoff." He put a penny in there thinking that 12 minutes would be all that he would be in there, but all of that nice conversation he was getting, he stopped to bathe his vanity in it. Then when he got there, the policeman was making out a ticket. He had it about halfway made out. The policeman didn't know whose car it was. Napoleon walked up to him and said, "Now, you wouldn't do that to Napoleon Hill, would you?" He said, "Who?" Audience laughed. Napoleon said, "Napoleon Hill." And he said, "No, I wouldn't do that to Napoleon Hill, but I certainly would do it to you." Audience and Napoleon laughed hysterically. Napoleon introduced himself, took out his credit card, and handed him his driver's license. He said, "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle." He took the tab, tore it up, and said, "Just forget about that. You may be interested in knowing that I'm on the Glendale police force as a result of reading your book, Think and Grow Rich." Audience and Napoleon laughed. The subject now is a positive mental attitude. Nothing constructive and worthy of man's efforts has ever been or ever will be achieved except that which comes from a positive mental attitude based on definiteness of purpose, activated by a burning desire and intensified until the burning desire is elevated to the flame of applied faith. Here are 5 steps, 5 different conditions of the mind, all of which lead up to a positive mental attitude. Take number 1, for instance, wishes. Everybody has a stock of wishes. They wish for this, they wish for that, and they wish for the other thing. We all have wishes. Nothing very much happens when you just wish for things, does it? Female audience member, no. Napoleon, no, nothing happens. Then you become curious. You put a lot of time to idle curiosity. Do you think anything ever happens worthwhile in connection with idle curiosity? However, you can and do consume a lot of times, oftentimes with idle curiosity, don't you? You put in a lot of times, oftentimes studying what your neighbors do or do not do, what your competitors do or do not do, just out of idle curiosity. That's not leading to a positive mental attitude. A step above that, you have hopes. Your wishes now have taken on a more concrete form. They become hopes, hopes of achievement, hopes of attainment, hopes of accomplishment, hopes of accumulations of things you want. Just a hope by itself isn't very effective, is it? We all have a flock of hopes, but not all of us who have hopes have success. We just hope for success. It is, however, better than wishing for it, isn't it? What's the difference between a hope and a wish? Audience give various answers. Napoleon, that's right. Hope is the beginning of taking on the nature of faith, isn't it? That's the idea. You're transmuting a wish into that very desirable state of mind known as faith. As you step up your mental attitude to where your hopes are transmuted into something else known as a burning desire. Is there any difference between a burning desire and an ordinary desire? Female audience member, yes. Napoleon, that's right. A burning desire is an intensified desire based upon hope and definiteness of purpose. How does one go about cultivating a burning desire for anything? Audience gives various answers. Napoleon, if I didn't know the answer to this, believe me, I could get a flock of answers here, couldn't I? A burning desire is an obsessional desire, isn't it? Certainly, you cannot have a burning desire without a motive or motives back of it, can you? Wouldn't it be interesting if you kept a tabulation for 2 to 3 days of the exact amount of time you put into thinking about the no-can-do side of life and the can-do side, or the positive side and the negative side? Even the most successful people would be astounded to find out how many hours they put in each day in negative thinking. The very outstanding successes in the world, the great leaders, are the ones that put in very little, if any, time in thinking on the negative side. They put in all of their time thinking on the positive side. Napoleon once asked Henry Ford if there was anything in the world that he wanted to do that he couldn't do. He said, no, I don't believe there is. Napoleon then asked him if there ever was, and he said, oh yes, back in the early days before I had learned to use my mind. Napoleon said, what do you mean by that? He said, now when I want a thing or want to do a thing, I start finding out what I can do about it and then start doing that. I don't bother about what I can't do. I let that alone. That statement was a world of philosophy. He put his mind into something about the part he could do something about, and thinking about that and not about the part he could do anything about. Napoleon then made the suggestion that if you put a problem to the majority of people, they will immediately begin to tell you all of the reasons why the problem can't be solved. If there are some things about the problem that are favorable and some that are unfavorable, the majority of people will see the things that are unfavorable first and oftentimes never see the favorable side. Napoleon didn't believe that there were any problems in connection with which you can't do something in connection with which there are some favorable sides too. He couldn't think of a single problem that could confront him that would have a favorable side to it. If nothing else, the favorable side would consist of the fact that there was a problem he could solve. He could solve it, and if it was a problem he couldn't solve it, then he wouldn't worry about it. The majority of people, when they're confronted with difficult propositions or problems that they can't solve, they start worrying. Then they go into that kind of state of mind. Audience members, negative. Napoleon, negative state of mind. Do you ever accomplish anything worthwhile when you're in that state of mind? Audience members, no. No, you don't. You're only mud in the water when your mind is negative. You never accomplish anything worthwhile. You have to learn to keep your mind positive at all times when you want to do things worthwhile. Does a positive mental attitude attract opportunities or does it repel it? Audience members, attracts. Does a negative mental attitude attract favorable opportunities or does it repel them? Audience members, repel. Napoleon, it repels them, doesn't it? Female audience member, yes. Napoleon, definitely. Does that repelling of opportunities have anything to do with your merit or right to have opportunities? Audience member, no. Nothing whatsoever. No, Napoleon, nothing whatsoever. Absolutely not. You may be just, you may have the right to all the good things in life, but if you have a negative mental attitude, you will repel the opportunities leading to the attainment of those things. Your job is to keep your mind positive so it will attract you to the other things that you want, the things that you desire, and the things that you're going after. Have you ever stopped to think why it is that prayer generally doesn't bring you anything except a negative result? Have you ever stopped and wondered about that? Napoleon believed that was the stumbling block of most people in all religions. they don't understand why prayer generally brings negative results. You couldn't expect anything else because there's a law that governs that. The law is that your mind attracts you to the counterpart of the things that the mind is feeding upon. There's no exception to that. If you want to attract through prayer or otherwise the things that you desire, you have to make your mind positive. You not only have to believe, but you have to put action back of that belief and transmute it into applied faith. You cannot have applied faith in a negative state of mind. The two just don't go together. Constructive mottos are often used by people who recognize what a powerful influence one's daily environment has on the maintenance of a positive mental attitude. The entire industrial plant of the R.G. Latourneau Company with 2,000 employees was positivized by placing mottos printed in large letters in all departments. Those mottos were written for a purpose. Every department in that great plant had mottos replaced there regularly and sometimes daily in the cafeteria. In the other departments it was weekly. The mottos were written in letters half a foot high so that you could read them all the way across the building. Every time they walked into their department they saw that motto. Napoleon had an experience with them. He was standing in the cafeteria one day when the motto was placed up where all the men lined up to get their meals and they could catch them all there at one time or another during the day. The motto read, "Just remember that your real boss is the one who walks around under your hat." In the final analysis, you're the real boss. Napoleon heard a man let out an Indian yell. He said, "That's what I've always said. I've always known that my foreman was a louse." Audience and Napoleon laughed. Transmutation must start with a positive mental attitude because success, riches, and faith do not make bedfellows with a negative mental attitude. The transmutation procedure is simple. You can well afford to come back to this many times and assimilate it and make it your own. When failure overtakes you, start thinking of it as it had been a success. Napoleon, do you think that would be difficult to do? Audience members, yes. Do you think it would? No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't at all. In other words, thinking of it and what would have happened had it been a success instead of a failure, seeing yourself in the success side of the situation, not the failure side. Start imagining the circumstances of failures in your own imagination as being success. Start also looking for the seed of an equivalent benefit which comes with every failure. This is where you'll be able to transmute the failure into success. Every adversity, every failure, and every defeat has the seed of an equivalent benefit in it. And if you go searching for that seed, you'll not take a negative mental attitude towards the circumstance. You'll take a positive mental attitude because you're sure to find that seed. You may not find it the first time you look for it, but eventually you will find it if you keep on. 2, when poverty threatens to catch up with you or has actually caught up, start thinking of it as riches and visualize the riches and all the things that you would wish to do with the actual riches. Also, start looking for the seed of an equivalent benefit of poverty. Napoleon remembered when he was sitting on the bank of a river down in Wise County where he was born, just after his mother had died. He was hungry. He didn't have enough food. He sat on the banks of the river wondering if he could catch some fish and maybe fry some fish so that he would have something to eat. As he sat there, he didn't know what caused him to do it, but he shut his eyes and looked into the future. He saw himself going away, becoming famous, wealthy, and coming back to that very spot, charging up on the river on a mechanical horse that was run by steam. He could see the steam pouring out of its nostrils, and he could hear his horseshoes clicking on the rocks. It was so vivid to him. In other words, he built himself into a state of ecstasy that in that hour of poverty, need, want, and hunger, years passed and time came when he drove his Rolls Royce into that very spot, the car he paid $22,500 for. He drove it into the very spot. He went back and imaged again that childhood scene where he had been there in poverty and want and hunger. He said, "Well, I don't know whether my imagining this back in the early days had anything to do with it, but maybe it did. Maybe he kept his hope and eventually he translated that hope into faith, and eventually that faith brought him not only a steam horse, but something that's much more valuable and much more costly than a steam horse. Looking for and imagining the things you want to do and transmuting unfavorable circumstances and adversities into something that's pleasant, switching your mind away from the unpleasant things over to something that's pleasant." Point 3, when fear overtakes you, just remember that fear is only faith in reverse gear. Start thinking in terms of faith, seeing yourself translating faith into whatever circumstances or things you desire. Napoleon didn't suppose that anybody ever escapes experiencing the 7 basic fears at one time or another. Most people experience them all the way through life. If you allow fear to take possession of you and to grip you, it'll become a habit, and it certainly will attract to you all of the things that you don't want. You have to learn to deal with fear by transmuting it or translating it or transforming it in your mind into something the opposite of fear. In other words, faith. If you fear poverty, commence thinking of yourself in terms of opulence and of money. Think of ways and means that you're going to earn that money and what you're going to do after you get it. You can daydream. There's no end to the daydreaming you can do. It's far better to daydream about the money you're going to have than to just fear the poverty that you know you already have. There's no virtue and no benefit of sitting down and bemoaning the fact that you are poverty-stricken or that you need money and you don't know how to get it. Napoleon honestly believed that there wasn't anything in the world that he needed that money could buy or anything else that could, but that he couldn't get if he wanted. He didn't think in terms of what he could get. He thought in terms of what he could get. It's a wonderful thing to condition your mind to be positive, so when the circumstances arise where you need positive mental action, you're in the habit of reacting in a positive way at all times rather than in a negative way. You don't get positive mental attitude just by wishing for it. You get it a little at a time. You don't just get it overnight. Summarized by Andy Houseman.
Yeah, and thank you, Andy, if you ever see this, because he contacted me on YouTube and told me that he'd seen this Hangout, and he said, I've done some lecture notes that you're welcome to use, and so he sent them to me, so it's really grateful for that. Yeah, it was very kind.
Oh, that was a wonderful, that was a wonderful
That's how I got hold of these. I wouldn't have probably got them otherwise.
Yeah.
And he has a channel that people can subscribe to, Andy Houseman on YouTube. But I know we read this before, Glenn, but I love this passage, so I just thought, oh, well, let's read it again, because you can't hear times, I think.
It is to think about his dream, sitting in poverty on the banks of that river, right? And to see how that dream actually became a reality, right?
It's amazing.
That's part of what the book does, right? That's part of what
exactly.
What is, you know?
And I love what he says about it doesn't happen overnight. It's a little bit at a time, because I've really noticed that for myself. You know, and I just had my biggest success on the internet this past month, and I know that that's not a coincidence, because I've reading this book every day and applying more and more of the principles. I can feel something shifting inside. You know, it's like it's hard to describe, but I now I understand when people say that you have to just keep going, because like a little bit will change each day. And something I can share actually that's really useful from Bob Proctor, who became a great student of this book too. And he, in his book, You Were Born to Be Rich, his book is called, he talks about, there's a whole chapter called The Image Maker. And I think he's basically taking what Napoleon talks about in this particular lecture and expanding on it. And it helps me a lot, because I do this every day now. And I used to do it once every now and then. And now, like, the more you do it, the more you start, it becomes fun. Like, what I do is I daydream a lot about what I would like to have around me in my life. And
I do too.
You do that too, Glenn? Yeah. And it sounds silly. Like, I used to sort of think I shouldn't do that, because that was like, you know, you're daydreaming, you're not really, and I don't like sit there for an hour or something, but just if I ever feel, you know, I look around and I feel like, oh, things could be better, I start imagining that what's right in front of me is something else. And I keep imagining, for example, I would love to live by the sea and have like a beautiful swimming pool to myself outside my house. And I've been very lucky in the past 6 months to live somewhere with a swimming pool, and then to live in a beautiful place with a swimming pool that wasn't ready yet. And so I just kind of take those two experiences and imagine that it's right here in front of me. And that's just one thing, and I imagine lots of other things too. But for some reason, especially with the hot weather, that it helps. Yeah,
yeah.
and also, and what also I think of a lot is how athletes like Roger Bannister, the man who ran who ran a mile in 4 minutes. He was the first man to ever do that. And
Right
you know,
there.
when I first heard that, I was like, well, what does that mean? 4 minutes? It's actually a very fast time. Before
Yes.
before he did that, most people used to run it in 6 or 7 minutes, then
Right.
five, and he was the one who got it down to less than 4 minutes, and really broke there was a real breakthrough for athletes.
Yes.
And I saw him being interviewed. Ah, bonjour. Someone's just come home. And he said that he imagined himself winning it way before he ever did it. You know, he would visualize running that race and crossing the finish line and being told that he'd broken the record. You know, as well as actually running it. And many athletes do this. So I think it's with any target you have, you know, whether it's your own personal living situation or some kind of professional milestone or, you know, some sort of change you want to see in the world, daydreaming about it's like it helps you to, it's like you're focusing your energy on exactly in the way that Napoleon just described in what you read, Glenn. You're putting your energy on what you would like rather than worrying about what's actually around you.
Exactly. Yeah, I like what Mary Morrissey says too. She says $525,000. You know, it's actually in a year we have 525,000 minutes to spend, right?
Ah,
So,
right.
so how are you going to spend those minutes, right? Well, they should be towards your dream, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
like that thinking, you know. So,
Yeah.
so you know, that's in building your dream, right? In creating,
Yeah.
you know, we're kind of putting up sandcastles, but now we're putting a foundation under them, right? In
Exactly. And
your
then you
daily.
made a good point there because you can't just obviously sit there daydreaming about all the things and
No,
not
no,
have
but it is good to dream. I mean, it
but
is
but I
good.
think
It's a
yeah,
powerful thing to dream, you
if you
know,
combine it
and
with action,
right, yeah,
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 combine it with taking action every day towards what you're working on, and
yeah,
then the daydreaming part, you start to develop like a positive expectation that okay, this is where I'm going, and
yes,
and it took me. I just find it really interesting noticing the changes because when I first started to do all of this, nothing would happen when I did that. I can see now I was so, and I still probably in a year's time I'll be like, oh my god, now when I think of something, it happens within a month, or
yeah,
but
yeah,
I remember when just for anyone watching this now or in the future who feels like you might be doing that and it's nothing's happening, I can really relate to that because when I first, about a year ago, when I first came across this book, and I kept being told to read it by different people, you know, and I thought, okay, I'm finally going to read this, and nothing, and I would read my personal statement, nothing would happen. I would, I just felt like, I can see now, it's like, you know, when you're so deep in a hole that someone's telling you to visualize getting out of the hole and the
yeah,
lights, and all you can see is darkness.
hard, yeah,
You have
yeah,
to keep going because it will, like space will clear and it will get
right,
lighter.
yeah. Yeah, you know, you become better at transmuting, right? Really, that's what it is, you know, right? In other
Exactly.
words, you know,
Yeah.
you're getting the burning desire now. The burning desire is in your heart,
Yeah.
and you're attaching emotion now to your dream, you know. Very
Yeah.
powerful.
It makes me teary-eyed.
I could see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah. Well, you have a good day, Sandy, and I guess Monday we're back, right? Monday?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Oh yeah. Crying now. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. Before we finish, did you want to just share how your habit's going, Glenn?
Oh, well, you know, declutter. I'm moving along so well. I think I'll be done before my August 1st date, so
Ah,
I'm happy
cool.
with it. And then of course I've been doing the daily meditation, the Bob Proctor, because I think it's very good. The abundance meditation,
Yeah.
and that's in a way that's kind of a dream building thing too, right? Because as you do that, you do kind of dream about what your expectations are, right? You start to build them, and I find that's very good. And then also, I'm working on of course, the Dream Builder program now with Mary Morrissey, which is wonderful, wonderful thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so you can have dreams when you're 72, too, right?
Exactly.
You know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's a whole chapter in Think and Grow Rich about how many people's best parts of their life start when they're in their 40s and their 50s. So
sure.
I think Napoleon would be really happy to see that you're you're doing this all, you know, in your 70s. I know I will still be, for sure.
Yeah, I think you will be. I can see that. I can visualize that.
Oh my God, my eyes are still full of water. I'm actually, the emotion's gone now, but my habit is to, oh yeah, this is so funny. This habit I'm having no trouble developing. I had real trouble with the getting up early thing. I still haven't got that finished. But my habit this month in July has been to read my personal statement every evening before I go to sleep, and the self-confidence formula that Napoleon gives in Think and Grow Rich. And I've done it every single day. In fact, I'm doing it twice a day. So, so that's no problem at all. I know I have that down as a habit. I'm memorizing it too. So now it's starting to come to be in my head. I don't have to read from the paper as much.
Yeah.
And I think...
Well, that's part of transmuting. That's part of transmuting, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just when I saw... And it's so funny how sometimes... what makes you... Like, what's made me really do this habit is watching the guy I mentioned at the start, Paul Hutchings, who started the American version of this Hangout. Well, he does it by telephone. But he... as soon as... When he shared that he walked out every night next to his trailer, reading this personal statement and the self-confidence formula under the stars, and that as the more he did it, the more his faith started to grow. I was like, okay, there's no doubt about this. I'm doing that. And it's like you have this shift inside where you're like, that you're not going to flake out or give yourself excuses. You just do it. So yeah.
And don't you find when you do this dreaming, and then when you start the activities, right, to support that, it's fun. It is.
Yeah, it is. It's like you feel like you're an alchemist, or like
you do. You feel, like your hand. You're starting to do what the universe intended you to do, right?
Totally.
Fulfill yourself. Totally,
exactly. Yeah, it's so powerful.
Amazing. It is.
Oh well, thank you so much for coming out, Glenn, and for reading so lovely as well, and for everyone watching. On Fridays, I forgot to do it last week. I have to apologize. I posted a little reminder in the group. If you're developing a habit to help you develop more prosperity consciousness, then you can share how it's going and just get some support there. So I'll post that later on after this hangout. So thanks for being here. And
okay, so Monday, is it Monday? Are we on Monday?
Yeah, Monday we're on. Yeah, Monday's totally fine. So I'll see everyone on Monday.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Glenn.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Fist bump.
Exactly. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.